Hey everyone, AngryHoneyBadger here, and in today's video we'll be taking a look at Azir. We'll start off with his abilities and what order we want to max them out in, then we'll go over his runes and his masteries, followed by counters to look out for and what champions he does well against, along with team synergies. Finally, we'll take a look at the items you'll want to consider purchasing while playing Azir, and then we'll look at his pros and his cons. Be sure to like and subscribe to this video if you find it helpful, but for now, let's take a look at Azir, the Emperor of the Sands.
Go around the badger.
As for Azir's abilities, let's start off with his passive, Shurima's Legacy. Azir can summon the Disc of the Sun from the ruins of allied or enemy turrets. Additionally, Azir gains attack speed based on the amount of cooldown reduction he has. As for Azir's Q ability, that's his Conquering Sands. We'll be putting a point into this at level 2 and maxing this out first. Azir sends all sand soldiers towards a target location. Sand soldiers deal magic damage to all targets they pass through and apply a stacking slow for 1 second. As for Azir's W ability, this is his Arise, which you're forced to put a point into at level 1. We'll max this out last. Azir summons a sand soldier to attack nearby targets for him, replacing his basic attack against targets within the soldier's range. Their attacks deal magic damage to enemies in a line. For his E ability, this is his Shifting Sands. We're going to put a point into this at level 3 and max this out second. Azir dashes to one of his sand soldiers, knocking up and damaging enemies. If he hits an enemy champion, he gains a shield. And as for Azir's ultimate, that is his Emperor's Divide. Azir summons a wall of soldiers which charge forward, knocking back and damaging enemies. Remember that you and your allies can pass through this and gain movement speed. Use it to your advantage. As for his rune page, you'll want to take magic penetration marks, health per level seals, cooldown reduction per level glyphs, and ability power quintessences. And for his masteries, you'll want 21 in the offense and 9 in utility. Here's the page I recommend taking. As for the champions that can counter Azir, first is Ziggs. Azir has quite a few options when it comes to aggressing and how to acquire farm, so this matchup isn't a straight loss for Azir, although Ziggs' range and poke heavy style for this usually puts Azir under pressure and causes him to need to play correctly. Next is Xerath. Similar principles apply since Xerath is also a poke champion. Farming should be pretty even in this lane between both champions, but a good Xerath will be able to harass Azir down without taking much damage from him. Finally, let's talk about LeBlanc. This is actually a skill matchup, but every time I've watched this matchup and personally experienced this matchup, LeBlanc tends to cause enough strain pre-6 to have the upper edge. Her large damage output and distortion make it difficult for Azir for living and dealing damage to her. As for matchups that favor Azir, let's start out with Heimerdinger. You know his super annoying turrets? Not a problem for Azir since his soldiers can easily take them out without Azir taking any damage. This is pretty nice. Next is Katarina. You'll be able to trade harassment in the laning phase in your favor as she needs to melee creeps or expend abilities to farm. If she decides to go all in on you, you have 2 easy ways to disrupt her ultimate. You can win this lane easily. Finally is Yasuo. With the presence of your soldiers, Yasuo can't really dash around as much as he wants to without taking unnecessary damage. Just avoid his knockups and he has very little he can do against you. As for champions that synergize well with Azir, those include Maokai, Sivir, Gnar, Yasuo, and Sejuani. Champions that can help Azir initiate, zone, and block enemies from getting to him creates time and opportunity for him to use his soldiers to deal tons of damage. Like, seriously tons. As for the items I like to take when I do play Azir at level 1, I will almost always be starting with a Doran's Ring, 2 health pots, and the Warding Totem. My first few trips back to base will almost 95% of the time consist of a Morellonomicon. Occasionally you might want to go with an Athene's, which can be helpful. It can provide you with a little bit more regeneration, but the main reason why I do Nomicon is it is cheaper, and I think it just works better on Azir's kit overall. Also, I like the pieces of it in the laning phase better. But like I said, Athene's is good if you want massive regen and their whole team happens to be magic damage. Next, I will also make sure to pick up my Sorcerer's Shoes getting magic penetration. When the build moves on from there, I usually get a Deathcap. With the ability power and the increased ratios on it, I want maximized damage from this item. If I need to worry about physical damage or having a stasis would be nice, sometimes I will get a Zhonya's Hourglass a little bit sooner because the armor, the AP, and like I said, the active for the stasis is very helpful. After we've typically acquired those 4 items, the next thing you'll almost always want to get, and even sometimes sooner depending on the enemy team comp, will be a Void Staff. The magic penetration is key to Azir and almost makes it so he has little to no drop off in the late game with his sand soldiers since he deals so much damage. One final item you can pick up, and actually some people have rushed, it can work occasionally, I don't like to rush it anymore, is a Luden's Echo. It gives you a good amount of AP, and the movement speed later on in the game is very helpful for your positioning, either getting in, getting out, or just getting in to deal that damage. Finally, one optional item I do want to bring forward is going to be the Abyssal Scepter. The magic resist on it is very good, along with obviously the aura that reduces the magic resist of nearby enemies. But the reason why you would get an Abyssal Scepter is if you're going up against, once again, a full magic damage heavy team, and having this early on in the laning phase would be helpful. You might want to rush it a little bit sooner after you pick up your Nomicon. Moving on to his pros and cons, let's start out with his pros. He has amazing late game damage, he has good mobility to his soldiers, can secure objectives incredibly fast, placeable turrets is great during teamfights or sieging, and a well-placed Emperor's Divide can destroy teams. As for his cons, he's inherently squishy. He has a fairly weak first few levels, management of his soldiers can be difficult in chaotic fights. He is item dependent like most mages, he's easy to learn, but he's definitely hard to master. And as for my personal thoughts about Azir, I do find him incredibly fun to play. I also do believe his damage output is among the best when it comes to any mage when the game continues on to that late game phase. We've seen this in the LCS handfuls of time. We've seen it from Phoenix, we've seen it from Bjergsen, we've seen it from EasyHoon even over in Korea. The damage output that Azir has in those late game teamfights is amazing. Each time these players though execute Azir amazingly is because they have fantastic positioning. I think the downfall to Azir is in fact that it does take time to know how to position him perfectly and how to get all that correct, just damage down on the enemy team, which is why he has such a steep skill curve. But once you learn it, the damage that he outputs is almost too good, and I think future nerfs are coming towards Azir, just little ones, now that people have gotten the hang of him. Similar things did happen to Elise when she was released. They actually had her a little more buffed up so people could learn her kit, then they nerfed it down a little bit since people got too good with her. So I think similar things will happen to Azir. I think he's still an outrageously good pick if you decide to take the time to learn him incredibly well. He can be very pivotal, he can have just an outrageous amount of damage in the late game, and he can solo carry games, especially if nobody on your team's really doing great, but it's just a tanky frontline. He can actually deal the damage to carry a match by himself. I like Azir. If you're interested in trying him out, I highly suggest it. Other than that, good luck in your future matches as Azir on the Fields of Justice, and I'll see all of you in the next build video.